The rain was drumming softly against the kitchen window that afternoon, and everything felt calm, ordinary, until Adam started talking about an incredible opportunity. I remember the way his eyes lit up, almost boyish, his hands moving as if he could already grab that future he was describing. The smell of coffee filled the room, comforting, grounding, but something in his tone made my stomach tighten, a kind of urgency I hadn't heard in a while. "Babe, this is my chance," he said, voice bursting with excitement. "It's a business management course, exclusive, international mentors, limited spots." I wanted to smile, to feel that spark of pride I used to when he talked about his dreams. But part of me was already thinking about bills, rent, and how close to the edge we'd been living. Still, I said what a supportive wife is supposed to say. "That sounds great, honey." Then came the hesitation, the sigh. "It is $5,000. I've saved some, but not enough." He paused just long enough to let the silence do its job. If only we could free up some money. I looked down at my coffee, watching the cream swirl into little galaxies. And then I thought about the car, the one sitting in the driveway, barely used since I started working from home. "What about the car?" I asked. His eyes lit up instantly. "Really? You'd sell it? Julia, you have no idea what that means to me." I can still picture that moment, how proud I felt when I said yes. It wasn't just about the car, it felt like I was fueling his dream, giving us both a shot at something bigger. He came around the table and wrapped his arms around me, whispering, "You'll see, Jules. This will change everything." His words melted into my hair, warm and certain, and for a second, I believed him completely. That night, I couldn't stop smiling. I even told my sister, "He's finally chasing his dream." It felt good to say that out loud, like we were a team again. The next week, I listed the car online. Cleaning it out felt like saying goodbye to an old friend. The smell of vanilla air freshener, the faded parking receipts from my old office job, even the dent near the back tire that Adam promised he'd fix one day. When the buyer handed me the envelope of cash, I told myself this was the start of something new. I was investing in us. Funny how love can make sacrifice feel noble, even thrilling. When I got home, Adam was waiting at the kitchen counter, his laptop open but forgotten. I handed him the envelope, and he looked at me like I'd just handed him the world. "Julia," he said softly, "you have no idea what this means." I smiled, touched by his gratitude, or what I thought was gratitude. "Just make it worth it," I teased. He laughed, kissed my forehead, and promised he would. I wanted so badly to believe every word. For the next few days, our home felt lighter, almost hopeful. Adam started planning his classes, talking about mentors and case studies like a man reborn. Every time he spoke, I saw flashes of the ambitious guy I fell in love with years ago. I'd catch him typing late into the night, his face glowing in the blue light of his laptop screen, and I'd think, finally, he's doing something for himself. I was proud. I told my friends that he was investing in his education, that we were taking a leap together. I almost convinced myself it was true, but sometimes, pride has a quiet way of blinding you. Looking back, I remember tiny moments that didn't feel like much at the time. His cologne suddenly stronger, his shirts newly ironed, his phone always flipped face down. He said it was about professionalism, about making a good impression on his mentors. And I nodded, because I wanted to believe in that version of him more than I wanted to question it. Love can do that, make you ignore the small cracks, hoping they're just shadows. On one of those rainy nights, I stood by the window, watching him drive away, his taillights fading into the mist. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered, "He's doing this for us." But deep down, something didn't sit right. I couldn't name it yet, but it lingered, like the faint smell of smoke long after the fire's gone. The morning I sold the car, the sky was pale and empty, like it hadn't quite decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I remember brushing dust off the dashboard one last time, fingers lingering on the steering wheel. That car had carried me through a lot. Late-night drives when I needed to clear my head, early morning commutes, little grocery runs with the windows down and the radio too loud. It felt strange handing over the keys, but I told myself it was for something bigger. For us. For Adam's future. For the dream he said we'd share. When I walked back home, the envelope felt heavier than its weight in cash. Adam was already there, pacing like he couldn't wait another second. I held it out to him and smiled. "Here it is," I said, trying to sound light. "My baby's gone, but it's for something good." He didn't even look at the money right away. He just pulled me into his arms and whispered, "You're amazing. I promise this will change our lives." And I wanted to believe that promise so badly. It sounded like the beginning of something beautiful. We stood there for a while, the sound of the rain outside soft and steady. I teased him, saying he'd better become the next CEO, and he laughed that easy, charming laugh I'd fallen for years ago. "Deal," he said. He looked like a man with purpose again, and that alone felt worth it. I didn't know it then, but I'd just handed him more than money. I'd handed him my trust, wrapped neatly in hope. For the next few days, everything felt different. Adam started leaving in the evenings, dressed sharper than usual, crisp shirts, polished shoes, that cologne he used to wear only on special occasions. I'd watch him adjust his tie in the mirror, that little smirk of confidence playing on his lips, and I'd feel proud. He looked like a man chasing his destiny, and I loved the idea of being the woman who helped him get there. When he kissed my forehead before leaving, I'd whisper, "Study hard," and he'd wink, "Always do." At first, I filled my evenings with work. I'd sit by the window with my laptop, listening to the rain and thinking about how our lives might change once this course was over. Maybe we'd travel again. Maybe we'd finally stop worrying about money. I imagined him coming home one day with a certificate in hand, thanking me for believing in him when no one else did. Hope has such a sweet taste when you don't look too closely at what it's made of. But soon, small things started tugging at my attention. His shirt smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, something floral, expensive. His phone, once left charging on the counter, was now always flipped over, silent. When I'd ask how class went, he'd smile but never really answer, just say, "Great, lots to learn." I told myself he was tired, focused, but there was a weight in his eyes, one I couldn't name yet. Nights became longer, quieter. I'd lie in bed, listening to the rain tapping against the window, wondering what kind of lessons kept him so late. Sometimes I'd hear his car pull up past midnight, the soft click of the door, the careful footsteps of someone who didn't want to wake me. He'd slide into bed smelling like something I couldn't quite place, a mix of wine, perfume, and city air. When I'd stir, he'd kiss my shoulder and mumble, "Go back to sleep, Jules." And I did. I always did. One evening, while folding laundry, I noticed his shirts were suddenly ironed with precision, creases sharp enough to cut. Adam hated ironing. He used to joke that wrinkles gave clothes character. But now, every collar was perfect, every sleeve crisp. It seemed harmless, even sweet at first. Maybe he was trying harder, taking this course seriously. Still, something inside me stirred, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear but couldn't ignore either. I brushed it aside, telling myself love meant trust. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife. I wanted to be his partner, his believer. So I smiled, packed him dinners, and wished him luck before every class. I told myself that all good things take sacrifice, and I had already sacrificed enough to see this dream through. But deep down, in the quiet corners of my heart, something fragile had already begun to crack. It was a Thursday night when everything began to unravel. Adam rushed out the door, muttering something about an extra class his mentor had just added. He didn't even finish his coffee, just grabbed his laptop bag and kissed my cheek on the way out. The kiss felt distracted, hollow, like his lips were there but his mind wasn't. As the door closed behind him, a strange silence filled the room, the kind that hums in your ears and makes you notice every little thing. That's when I saw it, his tablet, still sitting on the counter. At first, I laughed to myself. He never went anywhere without that thing. I figured I'd call him before he got too far, let him know he'd forgotten it. But when he didn't answer, and didn't text back, something inside me shifted. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. It's hard to tell the difference when your heart starts whispering that something's wrong. I picked up the tablet just to check his class schedule, maybe email it to him. That's all I meant to do. Just help. But when the screen lit up, it wasn't a schedule that stared back at me. It was a folder labeled Celine. My breath caught. My thumb hovered over it like it might burn me. I told myself it was work stuff, maybe a classmate. But deep down, I already knew. Names like that don't live in secret folders, not ones with passwords. My hands were trembling before I even opened it. When the folder opened, my heart didn't just sink. It shattered, quietly, like glass underfoot. There they were, selfies of Adam with a blonde woman I'd never seen before. Their faces too close, smiles too familiar. In one photo, champagne glasses glimmered between them. In another, a hotel room behind them, the kind with crisp white sheets and city lights spilling through the window. My throat tightened. I could almost hear the echo of their laughter, as if the tablet itself was taunting me with soundless proof. I whispered her name out loud, testing it like poison on my tongue. Celine. Even the sound of it made my stomach turn. My fingers scrolled before I could stop them. Receipts, jewelry, dinners, a boutique purchase labeled gift for Celine. My chest felt hollow, my pulse loud in my ears. The dates hit me hardest. Every single one lined up with the week I sold my car. The week I'd handed over everything I had to help him study. It was like watching trust being rewritten into betrayal, line by line. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen, at their smiling faces, at my own reflection ghosted in the glass between them. I wanted to cry, scream, throw the tablet across the room. But instead, I sat down. My hands were shaking too hard to hold anything. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come roaring in. It arrives quietly, sits across from you and asks, "Still proud?" I don't know how long I sat there staring at that screen. Time felt strange, thick, like honey. The rain outside had stopped, but inside me, a different kind of storm had begun. I wasn't crying anymore. Not really. It was worse than tears. It was the stillness that comes when you finally understand the truth. Every lie, every late night, every ironed shirt, it all made sense now. The course had never existed. I hadn't invested in our future. I'd funded his affair. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and caught my reflection in the window. My face looked older somehow, but stronger too. "So this is what $5,000 buys," I whispered. A lie wrapped in perfume and false promises. I thought of how proud I'd been, how I'd told everyone Adam was finally chasing his dream. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time, but instead I just breathed, slow, steady, deliberate, because something inside me was changing, breaking, but also rebuilding. By the time the clock struck midnight, I wasn't the same woman who'd sold her car for love. Something colder had settled in, something steady and sharp. The pain didn't vanish. It transformed. Heartbreak hardened into resolve, into a quiet kind of strength that doesn't need noise to make itself known. I closed the tablet, placed it gently on the counter, and whispered to the empty room, "You'll regret this, Adam." And I meant it. When Adam came home that night, I was already sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd first told me about that so-called course. Only this time, there was no coffee, no laughter, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and a neat stack of receipts in front of me. I'd arranged them carefully, side by side, like evidence at a trial. I remember how calm I felt. That surprised me. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I was past that part now. The front door creaked open, and he walked in with that easy smile, the one that used to melt me. "Hey, babe," he said, setting down his bag. "How was your day?" I looked up at him, studying every inch of his face. He had no idea. "How was class tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice soft, almost casual. He smiled, shrugged, played his role perfectly. "Productive. Learned a lot." The lie slipped out of his mouth so easily it almost sounded rehearsed. I leaned back in my chair, eyes steady on him. "Really? I asked. From Celine? It was like watching a movie in slow motion, the way his smile faltered, the way confusion flickered into panic. What are you talking about? He stammered. My hand slid forward, pushing the receipts across the table toward him. The car money, the hotel bills, the fake classes. My voice stayed calm, but inside me, everything was blazing. Tell me, Adam, was sleeping with her part of your education too? For a moment, the room went silent, so silent I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Adam's eyes darted from the receipts to me, then back again, like he was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Julia, he finally breathed, his voice trembling. Please, it was a mistake. Just once. I tilted my head slightly, studying him the way you study something broken, deciding whether it's worth repairing. Once, I said quietly. The receipts say otherwise. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled it back before he could touch me. The movement was small, but it felt monumental, like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd stolen. You lied to me, I said. You looked me in the eyes and built a whole fantasy just to cover what you were really doing. His mouth opened, then closed again, like he couldn't decide which version of the truth might save him. There was nothing left to save. Not anymore. He tried again, voice breaking this time. Julia, I swear, it didn't mean anything. I almost laughed. That's what people say when they've run out of excuses. I stood up slowly, the chair leg scraping softly against the tile. It meant $5,000, I said. It meant the car I loved. It meant every ounce of faith I had in you. He looked like he wanted to speak, but I was done listening. For the first time in a long time, I was completely, beautifully done. He stood there, speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a man trying to breathe underwater. I could see the realization settling in, the panic in his eyes, the shame he was too late to feel. Julia, please, he said again, but the word please had lost its power. I turned toward the counter, grabbed my keys, and paused just long enough to look at him one last time. You didn't take a course, Adam, I said, voice steady. You funded your own downfall. He stepped forward, desperate, his voice cracking. We can fix this! That was the part that almost made me laugh. Fix what? A lie that had been dressed up as ambition? A betrayal disguised as education? I shook my head slowly. No, Adam. You broke something that doesn't come with a syllabus or a second chance. I walked to the door, my heels clicking softly against the floor, the sound of closure echoing behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. The rain had stopped, and the streetlights glowed faintly on the wet pavement. Behind me, I heard him call my name, once, twice, but I didn't turn back. I opened the car I had borrowed from my sister, started the engine, and drove away without another word. The road stretched out before me, dark, uncertain, but mine. The first few days after I left, Adam called nonstop. Messages, voicemails, emails filled with guilt and promises I'd already outgrown. I didn't block him, not yet. I wanted to hear the desperation in his voice, the crumbling of the confidence he once wore like armor. I listened to every excuse, every half-truth, and let the silence on my end do what words couldn't. There's a certain justice in letting a liar sit alone with the echo of his own voice. But anger, I've learned, is most powerful when it's quiet. I didn't want drama, I wanted consequence. So I started gathering things, screenshots, receipts, the fake course registration he'd downloaded, the credit card charges he thought I'd never see. I built my case like a professional, piece by piece, until his whole little empire of lies stood clear in front of me. And then one morning, I dressed calmly, put everything in a folder, and drove to his office. His company's HR department smelled like coffee and polished wood. The manager, a sharp woman with kind eyes, looked at me curiously when I asked for a few minutes of her time. It's about Adam, I said, and his extracurricular activities. She raised an eyebrow but nodded for me to sit. As I laid out every document, her expression shifted from polite confusion to cold disbelief. That was the moment I knew. My revenge didn't need yelling. It just needed proof. The HR manager flipped through every page, her lips pressed into a thin, controlled line. Misuse of company hours, deceit, personal affairs using corporate resources, she murmured. This is serious. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm, almost detached. I just thought you should know who you're trusting with your brand's money. There was no venom in my tone, just fact. And somehow, that made it hit harder. She closed the folder slowly, nodding once. Thank you, Mrs. Larson. We'll handle it from here. Walking out of that office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, light, like I'd washed something toxic off my skin. I didn't need to see his face when they called him in. I could already picture it. His confusion, the dawning panic, the way he'd try to charm his way out of a situation too big for his lies. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing with messages. He must have known something was wrong. I turned it over, let it ring, and smiled quietly to myself. 2 days later, word spread fast. Adam had been fired. Apparently, HR discovered he'd been using company funds and time for personal networking that didn't exist. Celine vanished the same week, blocked his number, wiped her traces clean. I almost admired the symmetry of it. The man who built castles out of excuses was now left standing in the rubble, and I didn't have to lift a single finger more. Justice had a way of doing the heavy lifting for me. After that, the silence between us became permanent. I didn't need to see him, didn't need closure. I already had it, the kind that doesn't come from answers but from peace. I started freelancing again, pouring my focus into my work the way I once poured it into saving him. The first few weeks were hard. Trust is a muscle, and mine had been torn. But rebuilding it, on my own terms, felt better than anything he could have ever given me. Slowly, I began to reclaim every piece of my life, one decision at a time. I saved enough to buy a new car, a small silver hatchback that smelled of fresh leather and freedom. The first time I turned the key, I felt something click inside me, too. Independence. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what that car represented. I'd sold mine for his lie, and now I was buying this one with the truth of my own effort. Every mile I drove felt like stitching up an old wound, sealing it for good. Sometimes people say revenge leaves you empty, but they're wrong. It depends on what you're trying to fill. Mine wasn't about destruction. It was about restoration. I didn't want to ruin him. I wanted to rebuild me. And that's exactly what I did. The woman who once sold her car for love now drove her own future, steady hands on the wheel, eyes forward. Months later, I found myself driving along the coast, windows down, the ocean breeze filling the car. The sunlight hit the waves in that golden, forgiving way only late afternoons can. My hair whipped across my face, but I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. No map, no destination, just forward. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and every turn whispered the same thing. You made it. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know who it was. Adam. Of course it was. For a second I almost laughed. The irony of it all. The man who once begged for my faith now begging for my attention. I let it ring, eyes on the horizon, the soft hum of music filling the space between me and the past. Each ring grew fainter, more distant, until it stopped altogether. Silence never sounded so good. I took a deep breath, tasting the salt in the air, the sweetness of my own freedom. Funny how something as simple as driving can feel like redemption. Every mile I put between us was another reminder that I didn't just survive him, I outgrew him. The woman I'd become wasn't fueled by anger anymore. She was fueled by peace. And peace, I've learned, drives smoother than any revenge ever could. I pulled over at a lookout point where the sea stretched endlessly, the kind of view that humbles you in the best way. The wind tugged at my scarf, and I leaned against the car, watching the waves crash and retreat like they were breathing. For a moment, I thought about everything that had led me here. The coffee that afternoon, the lie dressed as ambition, the quiet nights filled with questions I didn't want answered. And I realized something simple but powerful. The worst pain I'd ever felt had turned into the foundation of my freedom. My phone buzzed again. Another call. This time, I picked it up just long enough to see his name flash across the screen before pressing block. No anger, no hesitation, just certainty. The final click sounded almost ceremonial, like sealing a chapter that no longer deserved to be reopened. I smiled, tucking the phone into the glove compartment where it couldn't interrupt the peace I'd finally earned. I got back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred softly, steady and familiar, like an old friend who'd been waiting for me to come home. I rolled forward slowly, the road curving along the cliffs, sunlight spilling across the hood. For the first time in so long, I wasn't running away from something. I was driving towards something that was entirely mine. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sky melted into shades of gold and lavender. I turned up the music, an old song I used to love before life got complicated, and laughed softly at how good it felt to sing again, alone, but not lonely. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, lighter, stronger, and beautifully unbothered. The version of me who once doubted her worth was long gone, left behind with the noise of his lies. I thought about calling someone, maybe my sister, maybe no one at all, but instead, I let the quiet fill the car. Peace doesn't need witnesses. Somewhere between the winding roads and the fading daylight, I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted joy. And I had it, right there, tucked between the sound of the waves and the hum of the tires against the asphalt. My voice came out in a whisper, carried by the wind through the open window. He taught me one valuable lesson, I said to no one in particular. Never invest in someone who can't even afford honesty. The waves roared below, almost as if agreeing. I smiled, shifted into gear, and whispered once more, this time just for me. This time, I'm driving my own future. Then I pressed the pedal gently, and the road welcomed me home.